Okay, so we're talking about the camel and its symbolic meaning, its metaphors, its scriptural meanings, and how it's relevant in everyday life today. So, where is this camel? Where do we see it? So, who do we look to carry us through these desert-like conditions, or we'll say deserted conditions in our lives, right? We could say, for the sake of the visual, to a place of green pasture and water, what you'd be looking for if you were in a desert, right? Or deserted conditions, some satisfaction, right? Some relief. Where do we go, right? Who do you look to when you need money and you need a job? Who do you look to when you're looking for a spouse now? Who do you look to when you're looking for spirituality? So these camels are establishments and institutions. Establishments and institutions. They're able to carry us, just as the camel carries man. They're able to carry us through these deserted conditions, whether they be camels as large as the United States government or corporations or business entities or organizations, or even the institution of family. Family is a structured institution that can carry you. But these are all camels and symbolic of the camel, metaphoric of the camel. So we can see these camels as the desert ship. So just like that carries man. So just like you have an ocean and you have ships that carry man from the ocean to land, you have the desert ship. This is actually a term that was coined for the camel, the what can carry man through the desert to a destination of satisfaction, right? Two different concepts in terms of the ocean and the desert. I'd love to get into it maybe another time, but it's some juicy information in that. But here's something to reflect on. There are animals, this is what I've learned in my studies and what I've reflected on. There are animals that can carry man, and there are animals that cannot. There is huge significance in this understanding that God has provided for us. When you start looking at the animals that carry man, you start noticing that the same thing that these animals have to do in the condition or the environment that they are in, man would have to do if he's in that same environment or circumstance. Right now, we're talking about deserted conditions and how the camel is able to move through these deserted conditions. One thing is, when animals carry something on their back, they can't really see what's weighing them down, right? So this is one thing I was reflecting on is, a lot of times you don't know what you're carrying until you start developing some disease like anxiety or depression, or something bad happens to you because your load is so heavy. Whether it's bad intellectually or whether it's bad physically, we don't know. But while reflecting on this, it made me think, okay, well, what am I carrying and how am I carrying it? What type of animal carries in the way that I'm carrying, right? It made me think, like, is that a correlation? Is there something to that? And I definitely believe that there is. I'm going to be doing episodes on other animals that can carry man. And I think when you see them and you start putting the information together, you'll see that there's a huge correlation. For example, if you are carrying a huge burden like what the camel carries, this is an animal that is able to carry heavy loads for extended periods of time. Are you carrying it the way that the camel would carry it through these desert conditions? Or are you carrying it like another animal that carries man, but you're in the desert condition, so unable to carry the load, right? Because you don't have the makings for it. So what are these makings? You'd have to look at the animal itself to see, okay, what is it about this animal? What does he have? What do I have? What am I doing that gives me the strength and the power and the wherewithal, the will, the drive to be able to carry the amount that I'm carrying? One thing about this that's so important is, especially with women, women carrying these loads, having to hold down the family on their own, working themselves to death, the health and just terrible health, all of this is coming, is here. And not being able to do it, not being able to be in a desert-like condition where there are, limited resources for them in terms of having help. And therefore having to work like a dog to keep things going. And then, suffering, losing their life because they're not able to carry it. That's happening now. And a lot of women are like, I can't do it. I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do it. And, this is just, and they're taking off work, which is, I think it's great, taking off work and working part-time and saying, I'm going to spend more time with the family. I think that's awesome. I think that needs to happen. But okay, let me get back on track. Okay, so this is just something to think about. But when you're talking about riding on the camel, now camels have mountains on their back, right? Mountains, an accumulation on their back. And, this is kind of like when we're talking about using metaphors, who is the camel? What is the camel? Like I said, institutions, organizations, things that have accumulated over time that are able to provide sustenance. That is what a mountain is. If you look at a mountain, just a typical mountain that has greenery and waters and rivers, it has animals, it has pretty much everything that is needed to sustain, just kind of like an island. But organizations are like that. They've accumulated over time. They're able to provide jobs. They're able to provide support, charity, all these things that are needed. But the camel is symbolic of the institution that's able to do that. Now, when someone from another country comes here to the United States, it's because they're in a deserted condition. I'm talking about people that are leaving or running from their country to get here. They're in a deserted condition, and they need to travel to a place where they can have sustenance. And, in order to do that, they're going to be riding on the camel. That's how we can look at when you ride on the camel, you're riding on the mountain. Another symbol of that is when you get a job. When you get a job and you're able to live off of the mountain, this corporation, you're riding the camel, right? This is very different from someone who is like the camel. The person that's like the camel, you could say the person who's self-employed, or the person who owns the organization, who has built it, who has built that mountain, has accumulated all of this wealth and these resources. That's the camel. You getting the job from that person. You're riding on the camel's back. We can say it that way. So I hope you're following me. You have to open up your mind. This is a different way of seeing things and understanding things. But yeah, there are people that are like that. They literally have built something from the ground up that's able to provide for other people. Whether it's knowledge, it could be knowledge. It could be material life, whatever they've accumulated that in enough of an amount to sustain them in deserted conditions. And this is something that's a challenge for Americans. I'm not sure about other people, other places. I'm an American. But this is something that is a challenge because of all the distractions, all of the spending that we do, our inability to save, our inability to build institutions, our inability to create systems for some of us, a lot of us. People that create systems and institutions and things, that is the grand minority. But yeah, so it's most of us are riding on the camel or living in the mountain, as you can say. But when we look at the camel and how he was created and the mountains and how they're accumulated and made firm and the sky and how it's been elevated, there are similarities between these three things in terms of elevation and how they move in their condition, right? How the camel moves in the desert. how the mountain accumulates under the circumstances, whatever that could be. It could be the mountain in somewhere that it's ice cold. It could be the mountain that accumulates on the island. And then the clouds, how they mount up in the sky and move through the sky. There are several similarities in this, and that's one of the things I'm studying right now. This is about the camel, so I can't get too much into the other two, but the primary thing I think is looking at the different conditions that these mountains accumulate in and seeing the significance of what they're able to provide based on the conditions that they accumulate in, and then matching that into your environment or your circumstance to see, okay, well, what do I need to do in order to accumulate wealth? What do I need to do in order to create an institution or accumulate family life? These type of things. Another interesting thing when researching and looking at the camel is, have you ever watched how a camel comes down to the ground in order to pick up the person? When the camel comes down, he comes down very slowly, very deliberately, and he comes all the way down flat to the ground. Other animals that man rides do not do that. And when you watch the person get on the camel, it's as if the camel came down just for the man, right? You watch the person get on the camel, it's very easy. And then the camel, when he comes up, he raises from the back first and then to the front, from the back to the middle to the front. And, this animal is associated with wealth and leadership. So one of the things I saw in that, when comparing, how the animal comes down, how the animal stands up when man is riding on his back, was how man should rise. Okay, to leadership, coming from the back, not the person that just jumps on the mountain, you just jump on for a ride, right? You can jump on a horse for a ride, a donkey. They're not coming down to help you raise up. You just hop on top of them and you take the ride, right? So whatever that context could be in your life. But this particular animal we're talking about leadership and wealth, and we're talking about rising a certain way and moving a certain way. And so I think there's a good lesson in this on, rising from the back, meaning being someone who rises to leadership from behind, not just jumping up and wanting to be the leader. Someone who's raised into leadership, right? Who's raised into it, has gone through all of the motions of developing and rising in order to become the leader, right? So that was one of the lessons I saw and taking a look at that and how the camel is created. All right, I'm going to stop here. We're going to have another episode on the camel coming up, so be sure to stay tuned. I'd appreciate it if you have any comments. Be sure to like and share this channel, and thank you for tuning in.